Hi everyone, Devin Stone here. Today I'd like to change the format of the show a little bit and do an actual art critique. I've had the good fortune of getting to know Remodern artists, Richard and Michelle Bledsoe, and in some of our discussions we've had the opportunity to discuss their work and the Remodern movement and what it's all about. Remodernism is essentially a backlash, a revolt, a revolution against the postmodern movement, which, as we all know, has really infected and dominated popular culture for the last half decade or so at least. Remodernism is an attempt to recapture the spirit of the Enlightenment, really. In my last discussion with Richard Bledsoe, I asked him this question, what modernism really was and how that contrasted with postmodernism. And Richard and I both felt that postmodernism was simply a cultural veiling of Marxism. In order for an individual to surrender their will to the state, a certain kind of trick of the mind needs to be played on the general populace, and that is, who could say what a value really is? Who could say what wealth is? Who could say what greatness is? And, of course, who could say what art is? The slippery slope, just like what we're seeing today with abortion, right? Because I remember way back when, even abortion rights were being debated, that the opponents of abortion raised the slippery slope argument. And I remember these individuals being ruthlessly mocked in the liberal media for that. But essentially, these individuals were bringing up a great point, which was, well, if we're going to start killing or ending human life, then when does it end? At some point, the slippery slope is going to be reached where we're justifying killing people out of the womb. And now, of course, a popular political figure has advocated exactly that. It really is quite amazing. And this was something I remember even Adam Carolla mocked this idea in the 90s of the slippery slope. And the same is true of art. When we say, who could say what art is, we start to get things like giant balloon animals and piles of shit on the floor, pieces of trash. There have been instances, real life instances, where the janitorial staff of the art museum has accidentally thrown the art piece away because they confused it for trash because the piece was trash, literally trash. Waste baskets, crumpled up pieces of paper, things that require no skill. Michelle Bledsoe brought that point up as well in one of our conversations. How much skill does it take? How much mastery does it take to produce a piece that actually communicates something? And modernism being bathed in this world of real a priori values, a world of values, a world of meaning, and a world of metaphysical form. What values are we trying to communicate? What meaning are we trying to communicate with art? So in Richard Bledsoe's book, Remodern America, How the Renewal of the Arts Will Change the Course of Western Civilization, I'll include the link here. It is an absolutely phenomenal read. It's very accessible and a lot of fun to read, and I'm still working through it, I have to be honest, but I felt compelled to do a piece on this book because the cover of the book also portrays a painting by Richard Bledsoe, and the painting is called Among the Fortunate. And this is quickly turning into one of my favorite paintings of all time because there's so much going on here. There's so much being communicated here that I really think it takes a thorough examination. It's worthy of a thorough examination. Time needs to be spent to pick apart what is going on here, even right down to the title. I saw the piece first and kind of looked at it, and then I didn't really get it until I read the title, Among the Fortunate. And that, I think there's a little bit of playful sarcasm in there, but also some truth, because who hasn't felt like when they don't fit in that, oh, those other people that just fit in, the herd, the people that know just how to go along with the horde masses of popular culture are lucky. They get all the social praise. They're regarded as correct, as right, as living a proper life and having the popular perspective. And you see this reflected very clearly in the piece. So here we have a central figure. I like to call him the main character, and I think that's great that this piece actually has character and a character to it. And this is the only human, real man in this entire piece, and he's mimicking the flock, the herd. So that's the metaphor here, is that the flock of birds here that are all over the place and they all look the same are all crowded around, and they have the good fortune, you could say, of fitting in with everybody else and everything else. And there's some, I went through a lot of kind of emotional oscillations looking at this, because he's a real man. He's a real person with a unique soul and a unique identity. And he is wearing the costume, wearing the disguise of the flock, of the herd, by carrying the little bird head stick above his head, as if to hold it above his own logos, above his own identity. Like a scepter, he's raising it high there, kind of making an idol out of it. And he's wearing the costume like a feather outfit from his head to his back. But notice he's also adopting the behavior of the flock or of the herd. So he's stooped over, he has one knee raised, and he's looking very sheepish, as if kind of glancing to the side, as if he's trying to skirt by unnoticed, and he's trying to mimic some other bird that he's looking at outside of the frame on the left side of the scene. So it's really quite powerful, because there really is only one human character in this scene, and he's suppressing his entire brilliance and his entire nature in order to fit in, maybe with who he perceives as fortunate. This is an important point to make, in that this is not an easy thing that kids go through when they're put into the government school system, otherwise known as the public education system. I remember before being nerdy was cool, because culture does that. It kind of flips on itself. It pulls 180s. It condemns things, and then it embraces them, and then it revolts against them. I remember when playing video games made you a horrible person, when being interested in things like comic books, yes, and even superheroes and Dungeons and Dragons and all those things that are now celebrated and make people cool, and people brag about being a nerd. That kind of stuff got you pushed around and beat up when I was a kid, because the cool kids didn't play video games. They rode skateboards, they went to parties, and the quote unquote social rejects were playing Dungeons and Dragons and staying inside, kind of the indoor kids. But of course, these quote unquote nerdy kids are highly intelligent, and oftentimes had a tremendous creative abilities and inquisitiveness, and were interested in high fiction and art and visual design and things like that. So I really love that Richard discusses in his book his experience with going to see Star Wars and how many times he saw it. Star Wars being a Joseph Campbell style myth brought to life in this film. So I think there's kind of a double meaning here in the title. Of course, the herd is not fortunate. If you are unique and have unique gifts, you're fortunate. But it takes some life experience and hopefully an act of will or divine providence to realize that it is really the herd that is unfortunate and you are very fortunate. But sadly, the herd masses and the popular culture have a way of making you feel ashamed of not looking the right way, not acting the right way, not thinking the right way, not going along with the green agenda, the socialism, the feminism, the man-hating, the identity politics, whatever the Marxism du jour is that is out to wreak its havoc at the expense of the individual will. And so how do I know I'm right about this piece? Well, take a look at it. The herd masses, the fortunate, they're all going about their birdly business in what you might think would be an oasis, but as you can see, the body of water is a sewage. They're bathing in it, they're feasting on it, they have their faces in the water, and the colors and the lighting and the character of the background and the landscape that they're in is a very murky, filthy, dirty, unfriendly filth pit. It's a cesspit. It's a sewer. And this is very, very clear. If you look into the background, you see this little, I don't know what they call them, but it's like a manhole. It's a little, there's a little sewage opening. So it really is not like what you would expect to see in some piece that's trying to communicate the beauty of nature. This is an urban landscape. And what the herd masses are bathing themselves in and sleeping in is total ruin, garbage, and filth, which of course is what nihilism is and the cultural values of the modern neoliberal urban areas. And so if we look beyond that, we have some kind of dull trees in the way that plants are kind of tamed to fit in with the urban landscape. And then we see a very ugly, kind of dilapidated urban environment with a very rusty, unforgiving, and unfriendly sky. And so with this, Bledsoe is communicating that the environments that produce these values are really quite horrendous. And we discussed this topic in depth prior to me getting the book or prior to me even seeing this piece. And we had the opportunity to discuss what Richard's philosophy was about the urban environments. And I was curious about that. I asked him why did he feel that leftism tended to aggregate and populate in the cities. He felt, as well as I did, that it was a collectivist mode of being. Someone who migrates from, let's say, the cities when you're younger, because when you're a young adult like I was, you want to be in the city because it's happening and that's where all the fun is going on. And you want to bathe yourself in all the different cultures. But then when you get older, you want to own things. So that's part of growth. That's part of you wanting to express your own greatness and mature in the world, is the desire to own property, create your own space, create boundaries between your space and the outside world. And even if you have a family, let's say if you get married and you have kids, I realized what the appeal of that was, which really it is the opportunity for you to create your own culture. You hear families talk about that a lot. We do things this way in my household. So they have their own means of oftentimes religious or spiritual expression, family identity, family hobbies, family activities, and family ritual. And that's why the home becomes the central space, the central part of the American family. Unlike the urban environment, which is kind of a little communist in its flavoring. You often don't own things. You just pay rent forever. And most of the domiciles in urban environments are rented and not owned. That's why you move to the city, is to have other people in your face and be a part of the herd. And because popular culture tends to sell itself there into the youth culture, that's where you see all of this socialist leaning, new Marxist thinking go on in the cities. So unlike postmodern art, there's a lot of meaning in this piece, and it's very clear and it's very accessible and enjoyable to dissect and to look at, because it's actually communicating a lot of philosophical perspectives in the piece. Now, contrast that with some postmodern crap or some bit of abstract art where you need to be told that it represents all of this stuff. It's like, have you read some of these postmodern art critics where it's like a line on a piece of paper and it's, it communicates this or it communicates that, or they simply retreat to the absolutely boring, beat to death, victimization, morality mentality of the postmodern left. Like there was one big mural I saw back when I lived in Los Angeles of a homeless man. You know, he had his shopping cart full of his stuff and he's peering longingly into the window of a Sears because he couldn't afford the fur coats. I mean, enough of this already. It's I told that to Richard and he laughed because he said, of course, the artist behind this gets to get his brownie points in with the champagne socialists and then sell the piece for $15,000 or whatever it is. Yes, this piece, Among the Fortunate, was almost like a political cartoon. I don't want to speak for Richard Bledsoe, but of course there are no speech bubbles or anything like that. But it's almost at that level, which I think is just phenomenal. That of course, everything that we are, everything that makes you unique in terms of your personality, your thoughts, your ideas, or what you might like to express, is oftentimes going to be at odds with a completely artificial and oftentimes completely planned, rather socially engineered mass popular culture. When Terence McKenna said that culture is not your friend, I'm really starting to believe that, because how many times has it changed? I mean, I'm almost 40, so, not that young and not that old, I guess, but I've seen it change so many times. Like I already told you. So here's the thing. It was like a quiet, more thoughtful, more introverted person would be flipping through his Avengers comic books. And now, everything, all of that is completely mainstream. You can't even get into Comic-Con unless you buy your ticket a year in advance. I mean, it's insane. They have a whole system online. You have to click the purchase button within a 60-second window on a single day in order to purchase your tickets for San Diego Comic-Con. When I was working in a somewhat tangentially related industry, I guess, I remember we just bought our tickets. It was in 2006. We bought our tickets and we went and got a hotel and everything. Now the hotels are booked solid 1 year in advance. So it's extremely mainstream. And along with that has come the postmodern destruction of comic books, because they have to inject the social justice crap into absolutely everything. So this is what happens to art. You have to pay attention to this. So right there in the beginning of this fantastic book, Remodern America by Richard Bledsoe, he discusses how he was completely awestruck, as just about all of us were, with the original 1977 Star Wars, because George Lucas went out of his way to inject as much meaning and mythological content into the structure, the arc of the story as possible. And now look at Star Wars. Look at the fettered piece of shit. I mean, it's like bathing in this pond of refuse right here in Richard Bledsoe's painting. It's just a pastiche of Star Wars. It has AT-AT walkers and TIE fighters in it and lightsabers and stuff like that. But that's not what made Star Wars great. And they completely stripped it of any mythological content at all and injected every single SJW keyboard courage slogan into the last film, The Last Jedi. I mean, what a tragedy. What a travesty. What a joke. Where even like Ben Shapiro had to rag on the camel horse scene because the Finn character, him and his cute girlfriend or whoever, they're freeing the camel horses, and he took a detour so that they could set them free, and had a little PETA save the camel horses moment while they're trying to save the universe from the Empire. And they got a good little jab in at the rich people. Really kind of flipped the script on what those films were all about. I always saw those films as more of like a revolt against an oppressive government, the rebel forces being in many ways analogous to like the American Revolution, right? The American army versus the British Empire, perhaps. But they flipped that script, and now all of the evil empires are Donald Trump and the white man. And they even said in the last Star Wars film, well, the rebels are here to stand up for the oppressed and the downtrodden. That really wasn't the point of the rebellion at all. It was not an SJW revolution. Ben Shapiro made another great point about it, which was that, because they kept referencing this in Star Wars, that the Force is strong in your family, Luke. So there's some kind of element of family, bloodline, some special ability in his family. There's royalty in that family. And now it's democratized. It's the little kids at the end of The Last Jedi. It's something that all of the masses get to have, which of course is a total perversion of humanity and the way that it really works, as Nietzsche would have pointed out, I think, which is that there's always the herd. There's always the brainless masses that go along with everything, and then there are special people that really make a difference and really have something unique to say or to express. So here we go. I'll put the link, Remodern America, How the Renewal of the Arts Will Change the Course of Western Civilization. Love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. And the piece I've been showing you today is Among the Fortunate. Aren't they lucky to turn their brains off and just gobble up the filth of popular culture? What a brilliant piece of art. Thank you, Richard. And that's all the time we have today. Thanks so much.